Big Ten teams will be back in a familiar city, Indianapolis, this week for Media Days. Last week, it was the Mid-American Conference in the spotlight. This time around, it's the Big Ten's turn. And big news on the eve of Big Ten Media Days. Michigan is facing NCAA sanctions. Mark Kuntz is in Indy and has more on the Wolverines and the Buckeyes.
The cover-up is worse than the crime for Michigan's Jim Harbaugh, as the Wolverines head coach is facing a 4-game suspension to begin the upcoming college football season. Yahoo Sports was the first to report that the NCAA and Harbaugh are negotiating a settlement which would keep him off the sidelines for the first 4 games of the upcoming season. Now, it all stems from 4 seemingly insignificant violations, a couple of recruiting violations for impermissible contact, using analysts as on-field coaches, and having coaches watch player workouts through a Zoom session. All 4 of those are considered level 2. The problem that Michigan has run into is, according to the NCAA, at the worst, Jim Harbaugh lied to them during the investigation, or at the very least was dishonest with them. That lying, that dishonesty, is a level 1 violation and carries the more significant suspension. Now, Harbaugh won't be the only Michigan coach facing sanctions either, as co-offensive coordinator and offensive line coach Sherrone Moore and tight ends coach Grant Newsome will be suspended 1 game, and reportedly former Michigan defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald, now back in the NFL with the Baltimore Ravens, will face a 1-year show cause penalty, making it difficult for him to return to coaching in college if he should choose to do so. Now, the first 4 games of the season for Michigan should be relatively easy. They're all at home as they open against East Carolina before hosting UNLV, the primetime game against Bowling Green, and then the Big Ten opener against Rutgers. If the 4-game suspension holds true, Harbaugh will return for the first road game of the season at Nebraska. Now, it's important to note, reportedly during this suspension, Harbaugh would still be allowed to coach the team during the week. He just would not be allowed to coach during games. Now, not all bad news for Michigan on the eve of Big Ten Media Days, as the Cleveland.com media poll reveals the Wolverines are the overwhelming favorite to repeat for the 3rd straight year as Big Ten champions, as they are the preseason favorite to win the Big Ten for the first time since 2019. Wolverines receiving 19 more first-place votes than Ohio State in the Big Ten East, with Penn State coming in 3rd. Now, as for the Big Ten West, Luke Fickell in his first season as Wisconsin's head coach has been instilled as the preseason favorites, as they received 1 point more than the Iowa Hawkeyes. And keep in mind, Iowa now has former Michigan Wolverine quarterback Cade McNamara on their roster. Regardless of who wins the East, whether it be Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State, pundits picking the East champion to defeat the West champion in the Big Ten championship game right back here in Indianapolis in December in this final season of divisions for the Big Ten. That same Cleveland.com poll revealing the preseason favorites for the offensive and defensive players of the year for the Big Ten. Offensive side of the ball, Ohio State wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. coming off that spectacular sophomore campaign where he led the Big Ten in touchdown catches with 14, was 2nd in catches and receiving yardage with over 1,200. He was the overwhelming choice to be the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. In fact, the point totals for the 2nd and 3rd place finishers, Blake Corum and J.J. McCarthy from Michigan, you combine them, they still wouldn't elapse what Marvin Harrison received as the first place vote getter. As for the Defensive Player of the Year, a much more wide open race there. Slew of players receiving first place votes, including several from Ohio State as well as Michigan. But the media picking Iowa defensive back Dejon Cooper as the preseason Defensive Player of the Year, just edging the defensive end from Illinois, Johnny Newton. Festivities will get underway Wednesday morning with new Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti addressing the media. Now, one change we learned today in light of the hazing scandal that cost Pat Fitzgerald his job as Northwestern's head coach. Northwestern student athletes will no longer attend tomorrow's session. Interim head coach David Braun will still be here, though. On Wednesday, we'll hear from Ryan Day and Ohio State student athletes. On Thursday, we get to hear from Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines, and that's a change from years past as well, perhaps reflecting the fact that Michigan is now your 2-time defending Big Ten champions. We'll have plenty more from Indianapolis all week long right here on Sports Nightly. In Indy, Mark Kuntz, BCSN.